Welcome to Magdi-AI Tutorials, where we help you make the most of Magdi-AI, your software quality assurance AI assistant. Today, this tutorial is going to cover MagdiTestGen, where we can build test and framework. And in this particular video, we will concentrate on building manual tests from input. All right, so let's jump right into it and click on the MagdiTestGen button for building tests and framework. So as I mentioned, we're going to build from input, which is one of the ways that you can create tests. So give me a moment to create the input. Okay, so I just created a simple user story as input, and we will create manual tests from that using the style Gherkin. So we let Magdi AI cook. This method is pretty good if you just have a simple requirement and you just want to basically create some additional tests. Or let's say you have a very small feature, it's not really doesn't require a lot of effort, but you want to generate some tests that you can follow, you can use Magdi AI to quickly generate tests that you can use to follow. Depending on your organization, you may find that your company requires you to create very exhaustive tests, but then other companies require very little effort. Like some companies just go by creating exploratory tests or not even creating them, just doing them. So you see here, it says here, it's confirming that this is what you want to do. You want to use the Gherkin style to create tests that register and log in. So it's asking for some additional clarification before it goes ahead and generates the test. So it wants to know like what platforms, registration, things like that. So you can really give a very simple input, as much or as little as possible. And you can say something like is something like this. So now I just said use your best judgment. The application is going it's going to be run on web-based and on mobile devices. And then I kind of added some additional information such as display it as JSON. You can use whatever format that you like. If you're creating tests that will eventually be imported into a test management system, you can choose the format that the test management system recognizes, such as HTML or CSV. So we're going to let it cook. And it's also letting you know that you can proceed with standard assumptions, such as proceed with defaults. And he's going to generate all of these different scenarios for login and registration. If you've watched the other videos, I've mentioned before that sometimes using AI will generate scenarios that you might not have thought of, which is really, really cool, especially when we have to take into consideration tests that think about security and performance and things like that. So you see that for that very simple description, it actually generated the data in JSON format. One of the things that we can do is we can structure a format that it will follow, and then it will place it in the format that you most desire. So you can see that it is generating this different mobile metadata, gives you some metadata that takes into consideration. And then after that, it's using the uh, given when their format to create the rest of the test. So, you have the given this, here are some different scenarios that you should execute. So, this is one format that you can use to generate tests using manual input. So, you say create test just to kind of kick off the dialogue with Magdi-AI. And we'll let her cook and provide a response. And again, this is a great feature for if you're creating tests for simple use cases and it doesn't require a lot of overhead. You just want to add some additional test cases. So here, Magdi AI is letting you know that she's happy to help. She's giving you a list of things to consider, such as looking at the feature, the platform, things like that. It's also giving you some other suggestions such as feature, login, and password. And then finally, it's asking you if you want to create tests for manual test cases or automated. So let's start off by providing the user story that we used in the last example. And forgive me, I'm going to retype it because I forgot to copy it. Okay, let's see. And then you can also say, so you can say, please create based on default recommendations. You may want to do that because you don't really have an answer for all of the questions that it has asked. Um, you might want to have an opportunity to kind of talk with your project manager about it or your business analyst, whoever is providing the requirements for you, whether it's a product owner, business analyst, project manager. You want to be able to have the answers to those questions. If you really think, oh, I don't really need to do that deep dive, you can simply just say, hey, give me the recommended. Um, Please create based on default recommendations. And usually the default recommendations will be to create based on the latest technologies that people are using, such as different browsers, different um, devices, and things like that. So you could see that it created tests. It made some assumptions about the platform, the role, the style that you want, and you can see that it listed out the test case. The register new user is going through a happy path, and then it kind of lists the steps that you need to go through. Now, let's say, for example, you're like, okay, yeah, this is cool, but I really wanted the Gherkin format. So you can say, um, okay, so I'm asking it to do an update to kind of put it in the Gherkin layout and do a structured JSON output. So let's see if it will restructure the test cases according to that output. So JSON is a very popular layout that we might, sorry. JSON is a very popular output type that you may want to use because you're importing it into your test management system, or you have automated tests that will read in the test and process it accordingly. So, depending on how advanced your test automation is at your organization, that's another thing to take into consideration, that we can create tests that not only can be used for manual use, but can be then later used for automation, which is really, really cool because it's kind of like killing two birds with one stone. So while it's kind of generating the output for us, you can kind of see or scan through, and you can see it created up to 20 test cases. And again, a lot of times when we're doing this manually just from the top of our head, especially if we're not given anything other than a user story, which we inputted here, we may not by default think of all of these different variations that need to be created for the test. Now, it doesn't mean you have to execute all of the tests that are given. It just simply means that it makes it available to you. And in today's world, we have to think about not just the functionality of the feature under test. We also have to think about performance. We have to think about security. Sometimes it is one QA team that will perform those different types of tests. Sometimes there are specialty teams that will perform those different types of tests. But here, it kind of outlines the number of tests for you that you can take into consideration. And another thing is, if it is executing tasks that you normally don't execute, you can also say that it provides a little bit of training as well. You're like, this is what I should take into consideration when I'm testing for security, or I'm testing for performance. A lot of times, if we uh, are QA engineers and we do manual testing, we really don't think about all of those different things. So you could see that it did kind of outline everything in Gherkin style. I can also ask it, uh, So, what I basically did was say, yeah, you gave it to me in JSON, but now I want you to update it so that the display is proper for code so that we get a better formatted output. But as you can see, it absolutely did put it in JSON format. It actually did give us the gherkin, so it's the given when there, or is it given where there? So we actually got that format. You can actually kind of see in a string that is taking into consideration different browsers, different environments. So basically, different test configurations to be considered. Another thing that you might want to consider is if you already have a format that you prefer, we can train Magdi AI in order to use that format so that anytime it's generating text for you, it will by default use that format. And we will discuss that in another video. As to be honest with you, that is a feature that we will add to Magdi AI so that it will take into consideration maybe some of your internal processes and procedures uh, while it's generating tests. So, for example, if you have a framework, if you have a the definitions for your front end tags, your requirements for the product that you're testing. We can take that all as input and use Magdi AI to kind of generate information internally instead of going out to the web. We can use your information first to help generate the information. The other thing that it will lend itself to is when you're generating automated tests, and then we can kind of provide a feature that will let you link your internal framework so that if a task breaks down, you can use Magdi AI to kind of heal that test accordingly based on the given changes in the front end or given changes in the way the feature is expected to execute. So you could see here now we have a better display of the JSON format. You can see that it has a feature, it gives certain assumptions, it's listing the environments. All of that is good if you're going to run these through automated tests because then it could say, it can run those tests based on this test configuration. Here it provides test data guidelines, and here's your scenario um, for the test. So it actually gives you a very, very structured breakdown. And then here is the Gherkin where you have the background, you have the steps. And so you have a very structured way of collecting the data. So until next time, um, we will end the video here. And thank you so much for your time.